What's up, guys? This is TheKephas. World of Warcraft Dragonflight's been out for almost a full year, and I'm gonna be honest, I feel like it's been a pretty decent expansion. Certainly a step up from where WoW was previously, though to be fair, Shadowlands didn't really set the bar very high, did it? No, it did not. But with all that being said, I don't want to take anything away from Dragonflight. I mean, it added in dragon riding, those cool new talent trees that only get better with each patch. Speaking of which, the patch cycle, the cadence of patch releases for this expansion have been off the charts. Props to Blizzard for that, and just the general content being added and giving plenty of things to do out in the world. All those great things that I think make the game better in a lot of ways. Despite all those great things, I don't play Dragonflight all that much. And I think that's interesting because I think it's a good expansion, and when I have played it, I've enjoyed it. But once I started to step away to go play other games or different things like that, I never really found myself wanting to come back. I've come back to play Classic throughout the year, but I really haven't wanted to play retail all that much, maybe here and there. But for how much I like the expansion, it's certainly a lot less than I would think, and a lot less than I've played even expansions I didn't like in the past. And I want to talk about that because it's been a conversation in the WoW community lately. A lot of content creators talking about drop in numbers across the board in terms of viewership. A lot of comments that are saying a lot of the same things. Raid logs and mythic logs being down, that sort of stuff, that all points to this idea that maybe there aren't a lot of people playing Dragonflight, even though most people have a lot of positive things to say about it. Now, I don't want to speculate too much on this because there's no way to truly know, and I don't want to waste my time on that. And I also don't want to speak on behalf of everybody else that's saying this stuff or people that are or aren't playing the game. I don't want to do that. I only want to speak on behalf of myself and my thoughts on this subject, perhaps why I'm not playing Dragonflight as much as I would think I would. I love WoW. If you love WoW, please don't think that I'm here to be a doom and gloom guy or trying to crap on the game. I love WoW. I will always want to play World of Warcraft, whether it's a couple times throughout the year or more or less. I still will want to come back and play the game, especially as long as Classic exists. So I want WoW to stick around and do well because I love the game and I want it to always be there because it's a bit of it's like going back home. It's comfort for me, okay? The game means a lot to me, so I'm not here to be negative for the sake of it. I'm genuinely giving my thoughts on this subject. So if you don't agree with what I have to say, and you might not, it's okay. We can have differences of opinions, and that's totally fine. I'm here to talk about why I don't play WoW as much, and I think there are a lot of reasons. So the most practical reason why I don't play WoW as much is also probably the least interesting, and it just has to do with my own personal life, okay? Like where I am in my life compared to where I used to be. When I played WoW at peak, I was single, I didn't have kids, and I was in college. Life was different. I had a lot more free time, but you'd be surprised. Even though I do have now 2 kids, new baby boy, 3 days old. He's adorable. Okay. Even though I have 2 kids that I take care of, an amazing wife that I love to spend time with, I still get a lot of time to game. You'd be surprised how much time you can squeeze in during those naps and night times. And sometimes they like to sit in my lap and watch me play, and that's just the best thing ever. So I still get a lot of time to play video games. In spite of that, I don't play all that time. I don't spend all that time playing WoW. And part of that's because there are other games to play. And this is something that I knew back when I was really playing a lot of WoW. It kind of sucked. As much as I loved WoW, I've never been a one-game gamer. I've been playing games since I was a little kid back in the early 90s, okay? I've been played every game you can think of, every genre, on every platform. I play just about everything. And during my time of playing nothing but WoW, I was missing out on a lot, and I didn't like that. I mean, to this day, I still have yet to play the Mass Effect trilogy. I've never played Twilight Princess. I've never played Witcher 3. And these are things that I want to eventually correct. I've been working through a very extensive backlog, mostly as a result to my time being so devoted to World of Warcraft, and I don't think I ever want to be in that place again. I think it says a lot about WoW and the fact that it really took over my gaming life for so much time, and I missed out on a lot. The game was great and is great in a lot of ways still, but there are a lot of other great games as well, and I just don't want to miss out on those games, you know. And a lot of the ones that I've gone back and played, clearing out my backlog, has been a lot of fun. And when you can consider 2023 being, in my opinion, unironically, legitimately one of the best video game years ever, with so many incredible releases, it's no surprise that, you know, I haven't wanted to spend all that time, with all due respect to WoW, chasing the same carrot over and over again, when I can go play something like Baldur's Gate 3 or Armored Core 6, Starfield, Tears of the Kingdom, you know, Hogwarts Legacy, even little games like Fae Farm, you know, like even games like that. I mean, there are so many games out there, discovering new genres like Age of Wonder 4 and Civ 6, playing those games this year. There's just a lot out there to play, and there's still a lot that's coming out just this year alone. For those reasons alone, making up the most likely reasons why I don't play WoW as much, okay? So to be fair to WoW, a lot of it is just simply that. Life changes and people change and people's interests move on, you know, that kind of stuff. But I do still play WoW, okay? And I still like playing the game. In spite of that though, there are things about the game and issues surrounding the game that maybe make me play less than I would otherwise. And I do think that those are worth highlighting. And also, again, please understand, some of the issues that I have, you may not have. Some of the issues I have, you might actually like about the game. And I'm sorry that we might disagree on this, but I'm still going to say how I feel, because even if you disagree, I'm not wrong for how I feel. The issues with WoW specifically, the number one issue for me is how the game is monetized. And look, I don't really get mad about this anymore. I mean, there's only so many times that you can get mad, and so much of this has been stated and overstated time and time again. When you look at all of Blizzard games, it's just the way they are now. For someone who's just trying to get a fair deal and a decent game for a decent price, it's hard to find that with Blizzard across any of their games, and WoW is no exception. In fact, as much as I love WoW, I think it's one of the worst examples of video game monetization, because it does a lot of things that free-to-play games do, and it also requires that you pay for the game. It's not free, and it has a subscription. So when you consider the fact that you have to buy the box, the game has a subscription, which honestly, that in itself can be a hindrance for me, because as I've gotten older and wiser, and as so many products rely on subscription models nowadays, I've gotten a lot more conscious about passive spending. My wife and I both have. We at one time had a lot of different streaming services that we've cut off, most of them now, in favor of one or maybe two. And even then, what we tend to do is cycle between them. And that's how we do things now. Like maybe turn one on when there's a show on we want to watch, and then unsubscribe, and then do that with different ones. So we tend to cycle them in and out. And WoW is no different there. You know, if I'm not playing the game, I'm unsubscribing. I'm not giving them my money for free. And because of that, I think twice about when I resub. Am I going to play the game much? Am I going to really get back into the game to justify that $15 a month, right? And sometimes the answer is no, and therefore I don't subscribe, and therefore there's no chance for me to get hooked on the game again, right? So that does play a factor. Look, I'll be honest. I think that if you're going to have a game come out and you're going to put a lot of resources into it, and you're going to have all these updates, I think it's reasonable to expect your customers to pay a little bit more, right? Instead of just buying the box and being done, I can understand why you would want to pay for the upkeep, to keep the game running, to keep the game full of new content. It's reasonable to expect some more income for that game. So I have no problem with that as long as it's done fairly. And for the longest time, I thought a subscription was fair. What I don't think is fair is when you have to buy the box, you have a subscription, and then you have a cash shop. That's been talked about to death though, right? You have a cash shop in this game with all these other things, just like Final Fantasy does, and I don't think it's any better in Final Fantasy. That alone is enough of a problem. Having cosmetics, mounts, pets, and all those things that honestly have a lot more detail than what you're going to actually find in the game. It's not even debatable. That's the way it is. It's made even worse with all the boosting, you know, level boosts, which you don't have to participate in, but they're still there. And it's a multiplayer game, so that does matter. And it certainly matters with the WoW token. And even though in the past I didn't see the problem with it because I was benefiting from it as someone who was getting free game time, I didn't see what was happening. And I honestly think that the WoW token has made the game worse. And I honestly don't feel like any other form of monetization can be taken all that seriously when you get to the WoW token. I think that the buck kind of stops with the token. And I've come to realize essentially the WoW token is pay to win, and it doesn't feel good, and it does hurt the game, and it doesn't make things better. And I don't like that. In a game that you're already paying subscription, you're already buying the box, there's already a shop, you have the WoW token, you have boosting, and I think it's all made the game worse. I think that it reflects in the game and how the game is experienced, how the economy works, you know, the nature of leveling and boosting and those sorts of things. And I don't think it's good. I think it's made the game worse. And I do think it impacts my experience. And a lot of times it does make me want to play less. And it's certainly discouraging to see that in Wrath Classic. And like I said, going beyond the token is kind of pointless, but then you get into all this weirdness with the traders tendies, which I like the trading posts, but it's always felt like a way to monetize the game further. And yeah, it seems like they're flirting with that while trying to tell people they're not. So that doesn't feel good. And that feels very Blizzard. But another one for WoW specifically for me is the nature of the game now. Okay, and so this is a little bit more difficult to explain, but now that Classic is here, and look, I've been someone who's, you go back and look at some of my older videos, going back to Mists of Pandaria and seeing the game changing from what it used to be, changing from what drew me to the game. And there are some things about the game that I didn't like changes at first that now I don't mind as much. But what I've come to realize is it's really just the change in scope or focus of what the game is supposed to be, right? The game's identity, the goals in the game, and the mentality that the game has. Those are the things that have shifted. The soul of World of Warcraft is changed from what it used to be. And like I said, Classic existing sort of highlights this even more. Because for old WoW, for Classic WoW, the way I would describe it is, it's this RPG game meant for people that like RPGs, or maybe meant for people that sort of like that D&D experience. It's this massive open world where the game begins at level 1, and even though it's not really a sandbox, it kind of feels like one. And it feels like this heavy RPG game. It's honestly not that difficult. A lot of people say Classic was harder. It's really not. It's actually a lot more simple. But what it is this large social RPG experience made for people that like that style of game. That's what WoW is in Classic and what it used to be. What WoW is nowadays in like Dragonflight and in the past few expansions is it feels more like a game made for people that like to see their name on the leaderboard in an arcade box. It's all about min-maxing and efficiency and getting those high mythic keys. It's sort of like this competitive mindset, right? Like there's like this degree of competitiveness in the modern version of the game that really didn't exist that much in Classic. I mean, there were certainly the elitist jerk types from back in the day. They did exist, but for most people, it was just this like long adventure journey that you went on. Whereas now, WoW doesn't really feel like that type of RPG, storytelling, social journey that you go on, where now it feels more like an arcade game where you're trying to get the highest score and you're competing with other people in the same way. That's sort of what WoW feels like now through mythic dungeons, content that can be very punishing, that can be very like strict in terms of how you play the game, being as efficient as possible. And that type of game, that type of competitive, sort of mindset does not cater to me. I don't like that type of game. I'm not interested in that. And that's a lot of why I do kind of enjoy single player games nowadays, because they don't have that. They feel more like an adventure. I'll give you an example. When Zelda Tears of the Kingdom came out, I got it for myself and I got it for my nephew because I knew he would like it. So we're both in the game's version of the Great Plateau, the Great Island, or whatever it's called, the island above, the tutorial island, right, in the sky. And we both, you know, I played through it and I was like exploring and finding the Zonite caves and doing all this cool stuff and whatever. And I probably spent a good 4 or 5 hours just in the tutorial area alone. And my nephew, he's like 12. He calls me, how long did it take you to get through the tutorial island? I was like, oh, I'd probably spend a good 5 hours. And he's like, ha, I did it in an hour and a half. Did you check out the Zonite cave? No. How many Korok seeds did you get? None. Oh, you didn't check out that? No. And see, and that's the thing, is that his approach to games is this like speedrun mentality. He's comparing his experience to mine, even though it's a single player game. He's trying to be impressive by how quickly he blitzed through the game, just consuming the content as quickly as possible. Whereas me, I'm taking my time. I'm smelling the roses. I'm enjoying the experience. I don't feel like I can do that in retail WoW. But I do feel like I can do that in Classic WoW. And that's the key difference between the two games. WoW Classic begins at level 1, whereas Retail begins at max level once you get a little bit of gear and you can start doing mythic dungeons or raids. That's when the game really begins. That's how I feel, at least. And I feel like it's reflected in the game and also in the community, where I feel like WoW has always sort of had this edge to its community. It can be a bit abrasive at times, and even in Classic you see that type of mentality take over. But I do feel like Retail, because of the way it's designed, because of its focus on this like competitive mindset, it's the way it punishes failure, the way it can waste your time, it creates this sort of hostile environment with the player base. And I do see that a lot in Retail, more in Retail than I do in Classic. In Classic, I'm chatting with people a lot. There are people helping me. There are people that are running around offering buffs, giving away bags. You're in trouble out in the world and someone comes and saves your butt. Even Alliance and Horde players are working together. It's cool. In Retail, I don't really see that as much. I see a lot more passive interaction because you don't need to work together. You don't see a lot of chit-chatting unless you go out of your way to do it. Dungeons can be a little bit more hostile if you don't know the content, and if you aren't fast enough, if you're a tank, you can get kicked from dungeons. Mythics can be very toxic because of how punishing they can be. People not wanting to waste their time. Some of that's understandable. Some of it is a bit much, though, to be honest. And that's another factor, is not that I can't engage with people that are nasty, but more that I just would rather not. If I can play something else that doesn't do that, it's not really worth it to me to engage with that type of community. And I'm not here to like, you know, crap on the entire community, because there are plenty of good people in the community. But I will say that those types of experiences from the community, I feel, drive people away as much, if not more, as the way Blizzard has managed the game over the past few expansions. A lot of that, though, in fairness to the community, is because of how Blizzard has designed the game, for sure. So those are all pretty big factors in why I don't play the game as much and why the game isn't as appealing to me. There is one final one, though, that I want to talk about, and I'm a little nervous about this one because I feel like of everything I've talked about so far, this one can actually upset people, and I want to be careful of how I talk about it, because I want to talk about WoW's, I guess, vibe, in terms of the story, the characterization, the way the game is written. Starting after Legion, I thought that the writing was just bad. Like the characters, like what they did with characters that I liked, with like Sylvanas, Arthas, the Jailer, I didn't like it. I thought it was straight out bad, right? Dragonflight, I don't feel like it's necessarily bad, like genuinely bad, so much as I feel like it's kind of lame. That's the best way I can explain it, right? When the Evokers came out is a good example. They look kind of dumb. Like they're not that cool looking, and they look really lame and uninteresting, and like they're kind of fun to play, but I don't feel cool when I'm playing a Dracthyr, okay? Not as much as I do when I'm playing like an orc or even an elf, you know, in its own way. Like, I feel like it's kind of lame. And I feel like that same vibe that I get from the Drakthir is what I get from the expansion overall. I don't know what it is about the story. Like, there's some cool things. Like, I thought Razagath was pretty cool. But I also felt like it was also kind of generic. You know, like, a lot of the villains are okay, I guess, but there's not a lot of, like, I don't know how to explain it, but like, it feels like WoW's just trying to be safe, right? It feels like the story is, I don't know how else to say it. It's kind of flaccid. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's lost its, soft. Sometimes edgy can be cringe. And I totally get that. But WoW's lost its edge. It's lost its roughness. It's lost its, that part of what WoW was like. Cause like, you go back to Warlords of Draenor. The one thing people liked about Warlords was the vibe. Okay, it was awesome. The drums, the orcs, the story. Like, well, the story. Some of the story was fine. Some of it was. It didn't get enough time to cook. You know, like there are things about it that were great. And of all the things people didn't like, the vibe was not one of them. Mists of Pandaria is an example of a more divisive vibe. Some people liked it, and some people didn't. I liked it because I like Kung Fu, and I think Kung Fu Pandas is cool, but I can totally see where that expansion kind of had the same problem, where it kind of lost that vibe. I think Garrosh kind of brought it back in the end, though.
All who challenge me will burn in the fires of my hatred.
And I think that there were some villains in Mists that had it, you know, like Lei Shen, you know, those characters were cool, right? I think so. And I think that you can make the Pandaren, even though they're more nice, they're more peaceful, they're also badass in a lot of ways, right? Like Zenyatta in Overwatch is kind of badass. Like, he's this awesome fighter monk that is also a man of peace. I think he's awesome. He's peaceful, but he will kick your ass, okay? I don't know how else to say it.
You see that? Doesn't matter if you're a loser or a nerd or a freak. All that matters is that you become badass.
WoW doesn't feel like that anymore. It doesn't feel badass anymore where it used to. It's lost that. It's lost that part of itself. It's lost that its soul in a lot of ways. And what's left are generic villains that are too afraid to be villains because we don't want to offend anybody and we don't want to like stress anybody out. Honestly, that's what it feels like. And a lot of heroes that do more telling than showing, I guess. It's like characters are talking about their feelings all the time. To me, characters overstating their feelings is not good storytelling. It's not interesting. It's not engaging. Okay, it might, like, there might be some cool dialogue that you wrote and that might feel great to the writer, and then it's like the type of people that share lame quotes on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever might like that kind of thing. I like feelings and emotions to be shown in the story, not told all the time. Sometimes you can say things, sometimes you can reference those things, it's fine, but I feel like nowadays in the story it's overshown, it's overshared, overtold, and not shown. A good example of emotions that are shown in WoW that I can think of are Grom and Thrall going after Manaroth the first time back in Warcraft 3. It's this very deeply emotional scene that doesn't say much. There aren't a lot of words told.
Thrall, the blood haze has lifted. The demon's fire has burnt out in my veins. I have freed myself. No, old friend. You've freed us all.
You feel all of that. All of those emotions are still there, but it's not Thrall standing there talking about, I love my friend and I'm sad that he's gone, and look at everything. You know, he's not overstating anything. He's showing you how he feels through the scene, which isn't very long. Nowadays, it doesn't feel like that. It feels lame and weak and annoyingly dramatic. And sorry, modernists, not all masculinity is bad. Look at Kratos as a great example of that. Solid Snake is another good example of that. It's not about characters not having feelings. It's about how characters express those feelings in the story. That nuance and delicateness and skill in writing is not seen in World of Warcraft anymore. The issue is not that there are more diverse characters. Some people like to point that out. Pronouns! I think it's a little silly how bent out of shape people get. I think that actually having multiple backgrounds, I think that's a good thing. I think it's good to relate to people that are different than you, because then you can see the common ground that you actually have in the deeper and more important parts of humanity that we all share, that binds us together. But at the same time, I do see where sometimes there's this correlation with diversity and drop in quality. And it does happen a lot for whatever reason. It could be because writers get too focused on that and not on the deeper parts of characters. That does happen a lot. It does take more than the superficial stuff to make a character compelling. So much more. And I say that because as someone who's experienced it, as a disabled person, when Demon Hunters came into the game, I have a severe visual handicap. I'm almost completely blind. And there were a lot of people that said to me that I should play a Demon Hunter because Demon Hunters gave up their sight to be Demon Hunters. And I resented that because, as it turns out, there's a lot more to me than my vision. There's so much more to who I am than that. There's so much more to me than my race, than my sexuality, than my vision. And I think that while it's good to have all of those represented for the reasons I've said, that's not enough to make a character compelling in my eyes. I want to relate to characters on a deeper level than that. I want to see villains that are sometimes relatable, sometimes fascinating. And I want to see heroes that aren't just relatable on superficial levels. While I think that's fine, I want characters that are relatable on deeper levels, on who they are, how they act, and more so, especially with heroes, especially with leaders, especially as someone who's playing a video game, I want leaders to be characters that I want to lead me, that I would want to follow, that I would want to look up to. Characters like Varian and Thrall, you know, before all the later writing. Characters like Jaina before the later writing. Characters like Sylvanas before the later writing. That is one of the biggest things about the game that hurts it for me. I don't like the story, and I don't like the theme, and I miss what it used to be as someone who liked it for what it was, and for someone who was drawn in by what it was. What made WoW was not a bunch of dragons standing around having therapy sessions all day long. What made WoW was watching a paladin fall from grace by wiping out a civilization, and characters like, you know, Tyrion and Illidan and Thrall and Grom and Garrosh that are compelling warriors. Broxagar, legends that you look up to, that get your blood pumping, right? That's what makes WoW. And that's what I think WoW needs if it wants to be compelling and be successful in a lot of ways. That's what it's missing.
Has committed heinous crimes, Vol'jin. But some among you fought against Garrosh's tyranny. For that, I am willing to end this bloodshed. But know this. If your horde fails to uphold honor as Garrosh did, we will end you.
You will be remembered as the king who sacrificed his life for nothing.
For the Alliance.
Did you think we had forgotten? Did you think we had forgiven? Behold now the terrible vengeance of the Forsaken! Sylvanas. Death to the Scourge! And death to the living! You are not prepared!
The light will heal your scars.
I am my scars!
The light is your destiny.
My destiny is my own! You've doomed us all, betrayer! Your faith has blinded you. There can be no chosen one. Only we can save ourselves.
Anduin, I now believe, as you do, that peace is the noblest aspiration. But to preserve it, you must be willing to fight.
For Azeroth!
Your great power.
That's what it needs to get back. A good example of a game that found its identity again, Sonic Frontiers. That game found its identity. It figured out what made Sonic Sonic and what made it cool, and it turns out it did really well. One of the most successful Sonic games ever. WoW needs a Sonic Frontiers experience. It needs to get its identity back. And that doesn't mean that it has to be less diverse. It doesn't mean that it has to be less inclusive. It just means that it has to be badass again. That's what it's missing in my book. I spent a lot of time on that one, and I apologize, but I felt like it needed to be said. That's my opinion. Other people might disagree, and that's fine. But I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to talk about all these things, and I wanted to share at least my heartfelt thoughts on where WoW is and where I would like to see it go. Hopefully, in a way that makes me want to look forward to newer expansions. Because I can go play Classic all day long. I'll go back and play Classic. As long as it's there, I'm going to go back and play it. But I would love to get into WoW again, like I used to. I would love to get into retail WoW and be genuinely excited about it like it used to. But in order to do that, it's going to need some changes. So those are my thoughts. I would love to hear what you think about all of this stuff in the comments below. Please be respectful. Please be understanding. It's okay to disagree. And if you did agree, and if it resonated with you, some of the stuff I said, let me know about it in the comments below. With that, I will see you guys on the next one.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is TheKephas. Until next time.